What's going on, everybody? I'm Chris Daly, founder of the Sports Court, joined here by a man who's donated hundreds of thousands of shoes to people in Africa, a man who went from a chain smoker to professional runner with a Nike sponsorship in only a matter of a few years, a man who's the mastermind behind building the first children's hospital in East and Central Africa, founder of Shoe for Africa himself, Toby Tanser. Toby, thank you so much for joining the show. Honored to be speaking to you right now.
The honor is all mine, Chris, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And Toby, growing up, you were in a family that allowed you to explore many different things and allowed you just to get a taste of about everything. And you got into running thanks to a race you did well in. You were also encouraged on by a teacher named Mr. Matthew. But eventually, a few years later, you quit running. Then at 21, you saw a lad you used to run with by the name of Carl Thackeray running on TV, and that really blew your mind. And at the time, it was such an eye-opening moment for you. So can you talk about that moment when you saw Carl on TV and how it impacted you and eventually led you to going to places such as Iceland and Kenya in the coming years?
I can, yes. I remember what happened was I was very fortunate in the fact that my parents were custodians of a theatre. And the theatre was half a mile from our house, so I pretty much lived at this theatre. It was in 26 acres of sprawling green fields, and there was a philosophy centre and a theatre. So I used to play in the theatre all the time and just hang around a lot. And there were a lot of cool people there that used to smoke cigarettes. And unfortunately, in that era, cigarettes were considered, not like today where people know better. And so, I started to become this theatre person, hanging around the theatres, and all my friends were like at least 4 or 5, 6 years older than me, and everybody smoked, so I started smoking too. And at the stage, you say your lines, and then there's a lot of kind of hanging around, sitting around and doing nothing. Very lethargic type of lifestyle. And also I had a motorcycle from the age of 13, so I just became very unhealthy. And although it was a fantastic lifestyle, and it was fantastic, I always knew I'd get work in the theatre world and things like this, I just felt that I was in a rut. And I remember the day clearly. I was with my girlfriend, and we were in the living room, and I was probably on my second pack of cigarettes and my 5th can of Guinness. And she's watching the television. She had a little portable television. Now I was actually reading a book. And I just glanced up, and across the screen was a friend of mine, Carl Thackeray. Well, I'm not really a friend. He was just kind of a sporting acquaintance. And he was kind of the top runner in the local running club. So when I saw him running, I was like, look at him doing something very exciting. And 10 years ago, I'd been running against him. So I thought, like, wow, if he's doing something exciting with his life and I'm doing something boring. And that was really the impetus to I quit smoking on the spot. And I tried for 6 years to stop smoking, and I couldn't do it. But yeah, seeing him, that was the jolt.
Yeah, that's amazing. And from there, I know you started running competitively, and then you go to Iceland, you have all these amazing tournaments, get that Nike sponsorship, as I mentioned, and eventually you find your way to Kenya thanks to your Irish friend, but then he calls out last minute, and anyways, you're in Kenya by yourself. So while there, you came across some of the top runners in the world, and you started running with them. And you mentioned in your book a paradox that you came across. It was that Kenyans were fine with approximate distances and often ran more than the coach told them to. And you're actually stated saying, simplicity and less sciences produced optimal outcomes. So what was that training program like in Kenya, and what makes the Kenyans the best in the world at what they do, which is running?
Yeah, it was funny because, and again, in the 90s when I went across, there wasn't that much information. It wasn't like today where, there's the internet and people are posting A, B, and C and stuff. And I kept on reading these interviews that were Kenyan runners had given a story to a journalist who wasn't a runner. And I would see these schedules or these things, and I just said, that's ridiculous. So I wanted to also see myself what they're actually doing. And what I found, it was very, very simple. And what happened in the 1960s and 70s, actually way before I went, there were some British coaches that had gone across and kind of left out some very basic, training plans that people were still following up until today. And I found in the West, where I was living in Sweden at the time, they were looking at more different kind of like trying to think of what things do we actually have to add to the training program. Whereas in Kenya, it was the opposite. Just keep it simple. Running, how difficult it is, one put in front of another. And where in Sweden, for instance, we would have short sprint coaches, we'd have 400-meter coaches, would have 800 meters, different coaches for almost every 200 meters. In Kenya, we had like one coach for 100 runners, and some people were running the marathon, other people were running 400 meters. And it was very, very simple. So I started to realize running doesn't have to be as complicated as you think. So they train hard, and that really was a secret. And I would say another of the very, very big secrets that, not a big secret, a very, very big reason that we overlook often is the lack of distractions. And I feel like, for instance, here in America, kids have a hard time because there's so much opportunity. You can be a hockey player, you can be a swimming player, you can be doing basketball, there's so much, you go to the sports hall and there's 1,000 opportunities. Now, every single Kenyan runner, almost, that you'll actually see on the televisions right now, has come from a small village. There are very even few from Eldoret, the city where I live in Kenya. They usually come from these small little villages on the periphery of the towns. And there's nothing to do there. There's no malls, there's no cinemas. Most people don't have televisions. So the only thing you can do is run. I built some schools, and the first thing that they say is, oh, can we have a football? That's like a luxury for the school, is can they have a football to play soccer with? So when you think of that, and then you think of all the distractions available here in America, and electricity and things like this, it actually breaks down your chances of becoming good at one sport.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we talked a bit before the interview too about soccer, and I look at Brazil and even Argentina, Maradona, as you mentioned, for Sheffield. A lot of those guys, all they do is play soccer in Brazil. Soccer is like the religion there, and same with Kenya. It's running, and that's what gets you out of poverty, and that's what gets your family to a much better situation, and that's why people play so much. And now it's all adding up to me when you were saying that, maybe that's why all these Brazilians are so great, because that's what they have there. And just to continue on, you speak of Kenya for running, and you went there to find the ABCs of running, not the XYZs of humanity, and you ended up finding both. So can you explain the revelations you had about humanity while in Kenya, and what led you to the point where you airmailed your extra gear out there and handed it out as you left, which was ultimately the prequel to Shoe for Africa?
Yeah, no, you can't help but go with expectations wherever you go. And again, like in those days, I didn't read any travel books or anything. When I went to Kenya, all I knew was, what I'd seen on the television, a lot of problems going on there, and, stuff like this, and beautiful country, wildlife. So I went with a lot of, couldn't but help it in the same way, preconceptions of what I thought would actually be there. And one of the thoughts was, for instance, the more money you have, the more you can help in the world, and less money you have, the less you can help. And there was an incident where on Christmas Day, I happened to be walking through the Masai Mara with a local man who was from, he was dressed in a robe, and he had a spear and a bow and arrow, and he was a Maasai, the famous Maasai tribe that you'll see with the red robes and that live in the Masai Mara, where the most famous game park is. And we got lost, and we were walking around. Long story short, we actually saw a leopard up in a tree, which told me I have to get out of this area as fast as possible. But he'd got lost himself. He didn't know how to get out. And a Land Rover came driving along, and they were tracking the same animal. And so I was screaming and shouting. There was about 8 tourists in the Land Rover. And I was screaming and shouting, "It's Christmas Day, please help. We're lost on foot. We're not in a place where we should be. Can you please give us a lift? Can you help us?" And they were looking at us and taking photos of us through the cameras, and they drove off and left us. And now these were people staying in safari lodges, which cost hundreds of dollars per night, affluent people, and anybody who can afford an air ticket. I suppose I was affluent myself in the eyes of the people there. So I looked at these people who could have actually helped me in this situation. Long story short, that night when finally I found a way across, and I went across the river, and I was now going back to the little huts where I was staying with some Kenyan runners. And I was running through the fields, and a little child mistook me for Jesus. My shirt was ripped, and my hair was down to about here and all long and straggly. And so wanted to drag me back to his little, place where they were living. And I came to this place and I saw people who had had absolutely less than I thought possible to live with. For instance, an example was they were living in little mud huts, and in one of the huts they dug a hole in the ground, and they put a blanket inside the hole, and they put the baby inside the hole, and then that was the bed. Anyway, they were really excited. In the last hut that I went to see, they came and said, like, if tradition was proper, we would kill a goat and, feed you because you're hungry, but we don't own a goat. They said, the only thing we have is one hen, and then they beamed with big smiles and they said, we've killed the last hen to make some food for you. And to be honest, had they come to my door hungry and looking for help, I don't think I'd have answered the door. I think if they came to my door in Sweden, where I was living at the time. So to have these people that are willing to give me absolutely everything when they have nothing, and tomorrow morning, there's just going to be feathers from the hen and nothing more. So it kind of shook my world of realizing I'd gone to Africa to just really run. And I kept on, that's one example. I could have given you about another 6 or 7. I saw examples that maybe I wasn't in Africa to see what I thought. And the other thing was, I was running with all these runners. I was the one with the Nike contract, but every day I was running with runners who were far more talented and better, faster than me, yet only through birthright I was the one with the opportunities. So then I thought, okay, maybe I then start pushing across the opportunities to other people, and my purpose of here in Africa is just to help other people like that.
It's amazing. Again, it's great thing about sports is you can find out so much about yourself, and you found out so much, not just about yourself, but other people too, and the world. I think so much too on media nowadays. You just see the negative because that's honestly what gets the clicks. Most people are going to click on the bad news, but 99.99% of people on this earth are good, inherently good people, and that want to help you like in that situation. But it's unfortunate now what we see. So we live now so timid and so scared of other people, and meanwhile, most people are willing to help and just really good people.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. So while back in Africa for your second time around, I believe, this time working on promoting your book, and this was after you finally made it, Train Hard, Win Easy, you were attacked and beaten with a machete and a baseball bat. Luckily, by defending yourself, you managed to save yourself and live and come out alive, but of course you faced significant injuries. So what happened exactly on this moment when you were beaten and just thrown apart by these two men? And then eventually, how did you realize that was this a turning point, like a light bulb in your brain here about hospitals in Kenya after you realized they didn't have enough medications, they didn't have enough beds? Was this kind of a turning point for you?
Well, it was before your time, but in 1999, everybody wanted to do something really special because, once in 1,000 years, you have the changing of the millenniums. And so everybody wanted to do something that no one else was doing. So I was trying to find something that I could boast to my friends that would be the ultimate. And what I decided the best thing for me to do that I thought no one else could do was run up Kilimanjaro mountain, which is the highest mountain in Africa, sit on the peak and drink a can of Guinness as, 1999 past 2000. But a woman I was traveling with at the time, she didn't like the idea of going on a mountain at all. She just wanted a beach holiday, which I thought was a very boring idea compared to my exciting idea because, I had several other friends that were going to beaches, so it didn't seem to me anything special. Anyway, to make a bad situation, I just, I turned it into a running holiday in the nice weather, and it was nice. I was running along the beach, and then these two guys were coming towards me, and there was nobody on the beach. I found a deserted place. The sands were beautiful. The Indian Ocean was to my right, and to my left there was this line of coconut trees. And then dolphins were jumping through the water and getting me to run faster and faster. Like, it's just paradise. I was running as fast as I could, flying along the beach. And I saw two men walking out towards me. And I was thinking, like, why are they coming? There's no reason for me to stop. And at that time, I was a professional runner, so I could have easily outrun them had I wanted to, but it never crossed my mind that they were coming with bad intent. So I slowed down and came to a stop, actually, And when they were a couple of strides away, first I asked in Swahili, and then I asked in English, how can I help? Like, how are you doing? Da-da. And without responding, when they were 2 strides away from me, one of them, he was wearing like a jacket, put his hand inside a jacket, and he pulled out a machete that was about this long. And he just went boom, down on my head. Without a word, it was like a shock, and it happened like in an instant. But luckily, I managed to put my hand in front of my face just because I saw the blade coming. And so the blade came down. Actually, I have a scar that goes from here to here. Actually slashed open my wrist and cut into the bone. Loads of blood came out. But the other one, unfortunately, I didn't realize he'd got a jacket that had been hiding a club. And he swung as if he was doing a baseball strike. And it hit my skull and cracked open my skull. So I went forward into the sand and I blacked out. They stole my watch. They stole my sunglasses. They were stealing my right shoe when I woke up. And I was lying there in the sand, face against the sand. And I thought, maybe I'll just stay here for a while. And I thought, no, I was kind of like I was cross. I was being attacked. So I jumped up and I realized the machete guy was the villain out of the 2, the worst villain, I should say. So I fought to try and get the machete from him. And the other one was hitting me on the back with the baseball bat on my back. But I didn't feel the pain. I mean, my skull was cracked open. I'd got so much other pain. And I was using my arm as a sword to stop him when he was swinging with the machete. And then I threw my weight against him. He dropped the blade. I managed to get it. And then I became the aggressor. And I was saying, okay, come on, if you want to attack me, better odds now. Now they're asking me for my shoe. They were saying, well, we have one shoe. You have the other shoe. And I was telling them the shoe belongs to me. So they were saying, okay, well, give us the machete because the machete belongs to us. It was just one of these crazy situations. Finally, they realized that I wasn't going to give them the machete, of course. And then I put my hand on my head and I realized it went in like this and I'd got a crack and a dent here. And I realized this is worse than I thought it was. So I had to run along the beach. And I ran for 3 miles. It was the most painful run I've ever been in. It was like having bricks hitting against your head every time my foot came down on the ground. But there was nothing else I could do. And with nobody around, I figured like they were probably watching me. And if I fainted, they'd probably come back and steal the other shoe. So I kept the machete just in case. Thus, when I came to a more populated area, I was now covered in blood with a machete. Of course, everyone else was running away from me too, as I would run from myself too if I saw a white man running along the beach with a machete. I came to the place where I'd parked my motorbike, and the woman I was with she couldn't do the gears on the bike. So now I had to take my singlet and tie it around, well, it was around my wrist to actually stop the blood, but I had to take it and put it around the handlebar to hold onto the handlebar. And I pressed the horn. And I drove into Stone Town, which was the closest town to where I was in Zanzibar. Just pressing the horn the whole time because I could barely see. I could see shapes and things like this, and I kept on seeing bursts of bright lights in front of me. And luckily, a man on a bicycle said, "Follow me, I'll take you to a clinic." So he took me on. We were going down this hill, and I realized I didn't have the power to do the handbrake, and my foot brake was not working. So I told the girl on the back, we're in 4th gear now, let me go down to 1st gear to slow the gears. And then you jump off the back because I'm going to crash into the wall. So literally I crashed into the clinic. But I didn't care because now I'd reached medical care. And then when I opened the door of the clinic, I looked inside, there was nothing there. So that of course came to me much later with other things that happened to me. But I realized what care an African would get, an average African in this town where I was staying. This was a kind of healthcare that they looked at as healthcare. And when I was 11 years old, I went to a children's hospital in England, state of the art. My parents were vegetarians and they didn't have normal food in the house. In the hospital, I had normal food. And then my parents also, they didn't believe in television, so they wouldn't have a television in the house. But in the hospital, I had a television at the foot of my bed. So for me, I loved being in hospital. So I saw those two sides, being a child, being in hospital, having a great experience, and then being an adult, being in Africa, and having a terrible experience. So that kind of planted a seed of health and what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's a really crazy story, and I'm just glad you're okay, because the amount of times that scenario be played out, most times I don't think you would have been as lucky as you probably were in that situation to come out of it alive. And as I read in your book, it was just so surreal when I was reading it, and now just to hear it in person, it's crazy. And just to continue on with the hospitals here, Shoe for Africa expanded from you giving out shoes to you building a children's hospital after realizing the crisis that Kenya faced. Only 4%, I believe, of the GDP goes to healthcare. Meanwhile, here in America, it's about 17%, I believe. So many say the most impactful and influential people in this world are the ones who see a problem and find a solution. And that's exactly what you did. Using your wide range of contacts, thanks to professional running and networking in the city, you were able to fundraise enough to build a hospital. And in 2013, you started constructing it. In 2015, it finished up. So you worked with many famous figures in this project, such as Cristiano Ronaldo, the Williams sisters, Prince Harry, and many more. How do you go in terms of fundraising, building a children's hospital? I can assume that is a monumental task to take on. And then secondly, can you talk about working with stars such as Ronaldo?
Yeah, and I tried to I tried to work with the Williams sisters, but it actually backfired. It didn't work. And the reason there was Hewlett Packard had a 5-prong approach where they did health, education, and some other things too. And I was reading in the plane that Serena said one of the most impactful things in her life was opening a school in Kenya. And she talked about it with such eloquence and saying about how, forget the Grand Slams, forget the tournaments, being involved in philanthropy. And of course, it was Hewlett Packard that sponsored the school, and they used her as a figurehead. So I thought, well, that's education. What about healthcare? And they didn't have anybody being an ambassador for healthcare. So I decided then, I should call it the Venus Children's Hospital and try to get Venus Williams doing it. And at that time, I'd met Billie Jean King, who was, I think she's won 37 Grand Slams, most of them doubles. But she was like a big celebrity in the tennis world. So I figured that she could introduce me. And then I bumped into Serena literally at a party in New York. But nothing was actually going right. And that's actually one of the stories in my book, that I tried every single opportunity because, as you rightly pointed out, somebody like me trying to open a door doesn't really manage to open doors. But a famous person can easily get those conversations that will open the doors. So I just realized that, Toby coming and calling on the phone, no one's going to pick it up. But if I get somebody famous then to come and open the door, because all I was needing was somebody to amplify the story. Because when I told people for 1 billion people, there was only one children's public hospital, people are shocked. But, if I tell them, I'm only telling the people in my room. I thought if I could get a celebrity or somebody famous to kind of tell this story, more and more people would become involved. And what I mean by one hospital, because people are going, well, of course, there must be more hospitals. Children would go to adults' hospitals. And so that's pretty much what they would do. And when they go to an adults' hospital, the public hospitals were always running at about 150% occupancy. So doctors would have to make choices. Do they treat the adult or do they have to treat the child? And one doctor put it very in black and white, very plain to me. He said, if we treat an adult, it means that 10 orphans are not on the street tomorrow. But if we treat a child, and then he didn't complete the sentence. And obviously, it's just, as you touched on earlier, with the GDP, with little money going into healthcare, they have to make choices. So again, it was the opposite. When I was a child, I was prioritized when I had an accident. Yet when I was seeing in Africa, just through circumstances, children were not being prioritized. And that was why, 20, 30 years ago, 1 in 8 kids in sub-Saharan Africa were dying before their 5th birthday. And as Nick Kristof, the writer from the New York Times, pointed out, the biggest change ever has been access to healthcare. So I wanted then to put a children's public hospital, because there's private hospitals there's a children's private hospital in Kenya, but it's $200 a night. And when people are earning $1 or $2 a day. How on earth can they, afford a place like that? That place is for the rich, the elite, the charity workers. They're not for the common person on the street.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's exactly what you said too about the charity workers and the rich people, the elite people, the opportunities there, and it's just crazy. $200 a night and $1 a day, and you see so many places in the world the amount of people just making $1 just to get by. And then you mentioned in your book that you went to a place, I think it was Kibera, and they have one toilet for every 500 people, I believe. Which just things like that, just you would never believe that, especially me as an American. I come from the suburbs, so everyone has a toilet, even a couple toilets in their house, and just to think one for every 500, I find one for every 7 people that I live with to be tough, and it just really put it into perspective. So the first year of the hospital treated 35,000 patients. The next year treated 116,000. How fulfilling is it to see this hospital grow? And then secondly, how is the work coming along with the second hospital that you plan on building?
No, it's been really fulfilling because, I've done everything like on the spur of the moment. I decided to build a hospital on one morning. An hour later, somebody gave me the proposal and I accepted it pretty much on the spot just because of, all these life stories I'd had. But I never really looked at the repercussions, and I imagined what I'd do is I'd build a hospital, then I'd move on to another project, or I'd kind of pretty much forget it. But in many ways, it really has become my life. I've just become really involved in the hospital, and I'm there, and it's very heartbreaking. I don't know how doctors manage, because together with all the good stories, there's also a lot of very, very sad stories, because nobody comes to a hospital saying, "Hey, look, I'm very healthy today," blah blah blah. We're seeing sick people every single day. And also because of, circumstance and whatever, it's usually people come in a much worse state than to an American hospital where, we have checkups and things like this, and we're encouraged to go for checkups and things even when we're healthy. So, and that first, you say 35,000 for the first year, that was the first 6 months, because we opened on August the 12th. Mm-hmm. And we've been at full capacity almost. I remember on the opening day of the hospital, where it's supposed to be an empty hospital, already, we had a line of patients moving in, coming into the bed straight away. So that's also been very, very rewarding for me, because a lot of the time, and especially, when me being a foreigner, doing projects over in Africa, and people say, "Oh, is it really needed? Will it be used? ABC?" And you see a lot of projects that aren't used because it's like a Western person's idea coming to a place that isn't embraced and isn't needed. But this place, it's like a village market there. Every single day it's hustling and bustling, and every single inch of space is used. Yeah. And you were saying, I'm now coming on to my hospital. My second hospital, really pretty much because of that, is we have a cancer ward on our second floor, third wing, and we had 28 to 30 beds for cancer patients. And immediately we had 60 cancer patients. So we had 2 almost ready for every single bed, and we have more and more kids waiting, lining up, wanting to, get treatment. Because the same thing, cancer patients in Kenya are not treated in the same way that they are in the UK or in America, where, for instance, there's a lot of cancer centers. In the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, which is, again, 1 billion people, there isn't one single children's cancer hospital, and that's private or public even. And when you look at the 90% of the kids that are treated here in America that survive, they're all treated in children's cancer hospitals, because when a child is treated, for instance, with chemotherapy, they have no immune system, so they can't get any germ. It'll knock them out because they don't have an immune system to actually fight. So, for instance, a common cold can be a death-threatening virus for them. So, my next project is to build a standalone hospital. It's going to actually be in the next field, but a 152-bed children's cancer hospital.
It's so amazing about the cancer situation there, and what you're doing to fight cancer, pediatric cancer too, because it breaks my heart just to see kids. And I watched the video of the Shoe for Africa hospital. It was about 10 minutes, and it was super well done, super well edited and put together. But it really broke my heart to see these little kids just laying there, and the amount of pain they look like they're in, and to see you're the reason that they're getting help. And the person we talk about at St. Jude, I'm in the leadership society there, is Danny Thomas, and you remind me of Danny Thomas because Danny Thomas is the founder of St. Jude, and that's why he founded it. He was actually he was in a really tough place, about 23 years old, and he prayed to God. He said, if you build, or he said, if you give me some success in the movie industry, which he was in, he said, I'll build a hospital in your name, and his name is St. Jude, actually. He prayed to St. Jude, and sure enough, he had a lot of success, and that's what happened. And to see what you're doing right now with the hospitals is just really reminiscent of the modern day Danny Thomas, and that's a big compliment. So just really amazing what you've done.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, and like you say, St. Jude's, they're doing absolutely amazing job. I mean, it's a huge, huge team of people there, and unbelievable stuff. I mean, no way we can compare ourselves, even in the slightest, even after we build this cancer hospital. But we're doing the best we can. And I always think, if I'm a foreigner and there is not one single children's cancer hospital for 1 billion people, and I go and build one in one place, I really hope maybe somebody will be inspired.
Yeah.
I mean, there's far more people that have much better connections and, much more resources than me. So I hope maybe one time somebody will see and say, okay, maybe I should also build in one of the other 46 sub-Saharan African countries too.
Yeah, definitely. And just to quickly wrap up, I have a couple more questions, but I just want to start by saying you talked about a couple near-death experiences with the machete, and you had another one when you were in New York City and you got hit by a car going the wrong way, and luckily a good Samaritan and a good uncle to me, Dan Daly, was there to help you out and bring you to safety. So firstly, what happened on that day when you got hit by the car? And then secondly, how did my uncle go about in helping you?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. A shout out to Dan Daly here, who literally, he cared, because that's a lot in life is about, it's not about talking, thinking, it's about doing. And, they say talk is cheap. And so, Dan, I have to thank for stopping on the day. What happened now is actually, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon of a typical New York October day. And I was cycling down Fifth Avenue, and I'd got 4 fundraising meetings to go to, one at 5 o'clock, one at 6 o'clock, one at 7, and one at 8 o'clock. So my mind was bubbling with ideas of what I had to do for each of the meetings. And as you know, Central Park, Fifth Avenue is, the traffic goes from the north to south in 3 lanes of traffic. And I was cycling down, and being a cyclist, you're on the side of the road. I was cycling down, and I came to the traffic lights, and I looked at the green light, and I was thinking like, oh, good, because on the crossroads there were 2 policemen leaning on the scaffolding of a building, kind of like perusing, watching the traffic. So I started to pedal across, and what did I see to my shock? Driving the wrong way up Fifth Avenue, the only time in my life I've ever seen a car going the wrong way up Fifth Avenue, was this black car driving, coming straight towards me. I think he realized, he saw the 3 lanes of traffic coming towards him, because it was rush hour, and he quickly was trying to get across so he could zip down one of the side roads, and went to the side of the road, didn't see me because his eyes were on the traffic, and I literally catapulted high up in the air, and I came down, and in Zanzibar they cracked open the right side of my skull. I was lucky in New York, I landed on the left side of my skull, so I came crashing down in the middle of the road. And I lay there in the road, and I'm kind of like looking at the police, like waiting for them to come running across and stopping the traffic and things like this. And they were just completely just pretending that I didn't exist. And the car kind of pulled over on the side, and the car behind me started driving around, so getting out of the way, but continuing. So I tried to put my hand inside my jacket, ironically, to call the police or 911, because these guys were not doing anything. And luckily, your uncle Dan was 5 cars behind, and when he was maneuvering around, he saw me blink. So of course he thought I was gone, just because of the height that I went up and the way that I landed on my head. But he stopped his car, and he came out, and he actually, he works in the medical world, so he was like quick to call the medics, get them on site, and then so I had brain surgery on the left side of my skull. So now I have metal plates all the way around. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah. Well, I have to imagine it must be tough now walking through the TSA or through the metal detectors. Does it actually happen? Does when you walk through
I
like at
think
the airport?
if I put my head very close, but like if, for instance, just a normal thing, no. But for instance, if they do anytime also, like my head is bobbly on this side,
Yeah.
where literally, if you put your finger, you go like, okay, wow, there's something wrong. But interestingly enough, when I was having my second brain surgery, the first question my neurosurgeon said when I woke up was like, my God, what happened on the other side of your skull? He said, we were there, saving your life, but at the same time, all our questions were like, this guy has been through trouble. I mean, it's very rare to have two really, really bad, brain surgeries where you have to have, plates across either side. So I was just very fortunate. And again, it's just one of those things in life. Had I landed on the right-hand side of my head when I spun up in the air and came down, I probably would have died because the plates had moved and they're not as strong in this area. So it was actually weaker in this area than it was actually on that one. So
It's amazing.
Just good luck.
Yeah, good luck. And luckily my uncle was there, so he's a great guy, and always he's been telling me about you for years, and it's just so great to be meeting you now. And he's like, oh, this guy Toby, you should see the work he does, because my uncle knows, and I always tell him about what I do for St. Jude. He's like you. He does all this philanthropy work, and I've always wanted to do it, and I'm so happy we could finally sort it out.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Dan.
Yep.
Thank
Dan.
you.
No, yeah, I'm sure he'll be watching this. And just lastly, to wrap up here, you're a person that has seen some of the poorest people in the world, and you've been in places where people, as you mentioned, they make $1 a day. Some don't even make $1 a day, and they, as the toilet, as I mentioned, one toilet for every 500 people. And you've also spent time with billionaires working on fundraising projects, and so you've seen it all, and you've seen happiness on both sides of the spectrum. So I just want to ask you, can you just define happiness, and what does happiness mean to you?
The funny thing about happiness is, when I was 15 and I left school prematurely, unfortunately I thought I was clever and thought I didn't need schooling or anything, so I ran away from school and I went to live in Amsterdam. And I only had about 5,000 Kenya shillings, which is about $50-$60. So I ran out of money very quickly, and I was there with a friend. He ended up leaving because he also, when he had no money, but I decided to rough it out. And looking back, it might sound like it was romantic and fun, living off the street, begging, and hanging out with other dropouts and layabouts, but it wasn't really that much fun. But the funny thing is, my line of happiness, regardless of money in my life, has always been the same. I've always been a happy person, and I've always had a happy life. And it's never fluctuated, whether you have money or don't. And it's the same as, for instance, like in New York City, where I lived for a long time, I met a lot of rich people, and they'd always tell me, oh, our children are so privileged. But for me, a privilege is actually appreciating what you actually have in life. And sometimes we don't, sometimes we have too much, going back to what I was telling you before. So, for instance, I have a friend, he gave his daughter, his 10-year-old daughter, an iPhone 3. This is back in the time when the iPhone 3 was, semi-current. But she was crying and saying, I want the iPhone 4. And I remember, that time I'd come back from Kenya and I'd seen people who were so grateful to have a set of clothes, or so grateful to have a cup of water. And the gratitude that they would have for the simplest stuff. Yet this kid, daughter of a multimillionaire, was not happy because she didn't have what she thought was good in life. So I realized happiness is nothing to do with wealth, and it's nothing to do with material. It's about your health, and if you have good health, yes, everybody should be happy. I think that's one of the main lessons that I think we have. And you'll get through life. It's a tough journey. So for me, it's the thing about happiness, I would say, is it comes from feeling that you're doing good in the world. You're actually contributing, because life is short. You always think you have a lot of time. Time is undefined. It's, we measure it by minutes, but in real, actual fact, you can't really measure time or what it is. And I've always felt just the most important thing is to be busy. Keep yourself busy and keep yourself doing things, and that will make you happy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what you mentioned just about the privilege and all that is it's so true, and it's amazing to see all that you've done. And I just feel like the most fulfilled I get is when I can help out and do fundraisers and I can raise money, and I feel like I've had impact. And we talk about just you said just do stuff and stay busy and keep on doing things because I feel like a lot of people become complacent with sitting around, and a lot of people also set limits on what they can and cannot do nowadays. And I feel like that's drilled in our culture now, especially here in America at a young age. It's like, oh, you can do this, but you can't do this, and people will tell you, and people will place limits because some people don't want you to succeed more than they've done it, and they don't want to see you being more successful. And then there's of course people that want to encourage you to move on and do great things. So there's a mix of everything, but I feel like that's a huge reason as to why some people don't feel happy, and we live in such an age. Talk about instant gratification. Like I don't know if you're on it, but if you go to TikTok, it's like 6 seconds, 6 second videos, and people the attention span go down, and then they want to be happy right away, just like that, and they think it can come so quick, but it could take some time. And that's all I have for you, Toby. But I really appreciate all the words that you gave me today, and all the work that you've done is just so inspiring, and I aspire to be like you one day. Just raise money and make a change in the world, and all that you've done is just so awesome. So thank you so much, Toby, for your time, and just the best of luck with that new hospital you're building too.
Well, thank you, Chris. And as I said, you're way ahead of me because, yeah, when I was your age, I was very, very selfish. The world was all about me, and I really didn't care for anyone else apart from myself. So as I say, you're many miles down the road in front of me. So I applaud you for doing the work that you do, and the amazing work and the amazing impact that you've done. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank you. And it's always great to talk to people that have also used sports for a greater impact because, as you know, I'm a huge sports guy, and you use running and all your running context too to make change in the world. And I'm using soccer. That's what I love to do. I'm trying to use soccer to drive change and make some change in the world. And it's just so awesome to see. And I think sports can be used for such a greater purpose, and people don't realize. And people are kind of entitled; they just want to go at that. You want to eat a hot dog at an NFL game, but why not go to an NFL game or become an NFL player and use that platform that they have to make change? And it's just so awesome.
Why not? Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's almost an obligation. Anybody today that has a social platform, and to use that, it's a great way because, as you touched on earlier, I think every single person wants to help. It's just we often don't know the ways of how best to help. So if you see something obvious, and also if it's something that you like to do, which, I think that's a great thing about sport. It's such a positive thing to go into sport too. So if you can use sport for making good in the world, I think it's the best way.
Yeah, I think just leveraging your passions. And just to end off, everybody, go get this book, Running with Destiny by Toby Tanser. Such a phenomenal book. And I'm not a huge book guy, but I crushed this one. I went right through it. So that was a great book, and talking about all your stories. And you said a lot of stories here, but there's a lot more in this book too that can be discovered. So everyone go get that. I'll leave a link to that. And all the profits go to Shoe for Africa, which is awesome too. So thanks again, Toby, and just all the best.
Thank you, Chris.